Hello everyone, I am Risha and this is For the Love of Classics. I was reorganizing my bookshelf, which I love to do from time to time. This time around, I sorted all my books into two piles, the books which I have read and all my unread books. And while I was organizing all my unread books, I realized that a lot of them are Victorian classics. So I thought I will share with you guys all the unread Victorian classics which I own. So I counted all the unread Victorian classics on my shelf and I have a total of 29 Victorian classics. I do have one Victorian classic which is in Pakistan, so the list comes down to a total of 30, but I'm going to share the ones I have with me right now. I have tried to be organized for this video and I have written down the name of all the authors. I believe it's going to be easier this way to share. So I'm going to start with all the books by Anthony Trollope which I own. So the first one is Orley Farm by Anthony Trollope. This is a standalone novel by Anthony Trollope, which is a very long one. I've read one standalone novel by Anthony Trollope, which was The Way We Live Now. I absolutely loved reading that book and I can't wait to read this one as well. The next unread book by Anthony Trollope, which I own, is Eustace Diamonds. This is the third book in the Palliser series. I have read the first book in the series, which was Can You Forgive Her? I don't own a copy of the second book, and since I haven't read the second book, which is Phineas Finn, I don't want to read the third book yet. I'm waiting to get myself a copy of the second book of the Palliser series. The Palliser series has a total of 6 books in it and they're all pretty long. So the next 3 books which I own by Anthony Trollope are from his series Barsetshire Chronicles. All 3 of these books are really big. So from the Barsetshire Chronicles series, I have read The Warden, which is the first book of the series. I don't have the second book, which is Barchester Towers, but I do have the third book, which is Dr. Thorne. I have this in the Penguin Popular Classics edition, and I'm really looking forward to reading this from here. The second unread book from the series which I own is Framley Parsonage by Anthony Trollope. This is the 4th book in the Chronicles of Barsetshire series. And the last unread book by Anthony Trollope which I own is The Small House at Allington by Anthony Trollope. This is the 5th book in the Barsetshire Chronicles series. So I have 2 more books to buy from this series and 5 more books to read from it. Next Victorian author whose unread books I own is Thomas Hardy. I've read quite a few books by Thomas Hardy. I've read Far from the Madding Crowd, Under the Greenwood Tree, The Trumpet Major, Desperate Remedies, The Return of the Native, and I believe there's one other book by him which I have read as well. But I have 5 of his books on my unread shelf as well. So the first one which I have is Woman Much Missed by Thomas Hardy. This is a collection of his poems in the Penguin Little Black Classics edition. I believe I can just read it in one go. All I need to do is just sit down with it. The next book which I own by Thomas Hardy is Jude the Obscure. This is also in the Penguin Popular Classics edition. This edition of the book is also in perfect condition. This is the last novel by Thomas Hardy and I believe it explores some different themes than his usual works. The next 3 unread books by Thomas Hardy which I own are from Wordsworth Classics and all 3 of the covers match. Whoops. Look at this. These editions by Wordsworth are some of my favorites. I love the covers. So the first one is A Pair of Blue Eyes by Thomas Hardy. The cover design is by Lisa Graham and I think it's unbelievably cute. The next book is Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy. And then the last unread book by Thomas Hardy which I own is The Woodlanders. I love the cover of this as well. It is a mixture of greens and oranges, looks very autumnal. And this cover design is by a contemporary artist called Anna Tisdale. It's from a private collection in the Bridgeman Art Library in London. The next unread classics are from Charles Dickens. I have read quite a few of his books as well. I have read Great Expectations, Little Dorrit, David Copperfield, Bleak House, and Hard Times. I believe those are the 5 books by him which I have read. but I have 4 other of his books with me which I plan to read as well. The first one is Dombey and Son. This was a recent purchase and I'm so happy to own this book even though it cost a fortune. But I love this edition and it smells amazing. It smells so good, honestly. And I'm pretty excited about this book. I have a very good feeling about Dombey and Son. The next unread book by Charles Dickens which I own is Oliver Twist in the Vintage Classics edition. Another edition which I absolutely love having because it's so stunning. So this is his second unread book which I own. And the next 2 unread books by Charles Dickens which I own are A Tale of Two Cities and Martin Chuzzlewit. This is in the Penguin Popular Classics edition as well, but I'm afraid this edition is not in the best condition. I mean, it's readable, but there are some, I'm not sure if you guys can see it, but the book is a little bit damaged, and unfortunately the font in this is also teeny tiny. This book is almost 700 pages long and I think it's going to be quite difficult to read it from here because the font is so small. So the next Victorian author whose unread books I own is George Eliot. I have 4 of her unread books with me. So the first one is Felix Holt, The Radical by George Eliot. I have this book in the Old Wordsworth Classics edition. I immediately bought this book when I saw it in a bookshop because I haven't seen a lot of editions for this particular book. And I think I got it at a very good price as well. Just 300 Pakistani rupees from Said Book Bank, which is the biggest bookstore in Islamabad, the capital city of Pakistan. So I'm happy to have this one unique book. The next book by George Eliot which I own is Silas Marner. This is in the Vintage Classics edition. I love these yellow backs from Vintage. I think they are stunning as well. They also have black edges on the papers. The next book by George Eliot which I own is Daniel Deronda. This is in the Wordsworth Classics edition as well. I'm not too sure about the cover, but if I end up loving the book, then I might get myself a decent copy. This is a very long book as well, around 700 pages long. And the last book by George Eliot which I own is The Mill on the Floss by George Eliot. Now I've got myself 2 books from George Gissing. There is The Whirlpool by George Gissing which I got in the Penguin Black Classics edition. And then I have New Grub Street by George Gissing in the Penguin English Library editions. There's a portrait of George Gissing inside as well. Since you guys know I love The Odd Women by George Gissing, so I am very excited to read his other works as well. I feel like he's one author I will enjoy reading from because he writes very realistic type of stories, I believe, and they are very well written and a bit bleak, but that's what I like about his writing. His writing is very blatantly honest. The next 2 books I have are by the Bronte sisters. So I have Villette by Charlotte Bronte, which is the only unread book by the Bronte sisters I own. I've read all their other works. So I've read both the books by Anne Bronte. I've read Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, and I've read Jane Eyre, The Professor, and Shirley by Charlotte Bronte. I'm just left with Villette. And then I have this collection of poems by Emily Bronte called The Night is Darkening Round Me in the Penguin Little Black Classics edition. So the next 2 books which I have are by H.G. Wells. I have The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells in the Penguin Black Classics edition. And then I have The Shape of Things to Come by H.G. Wells. I got it from an old bookshop as well. It's pretty brand new, but I'm not too sure whether I will enjoy reading this or will I ever get to this as well, because this is like science fiction. I thought it sounded a bit interesting when I saw it at the shop, but I'm not too sure whether I'm in the mood for it at the moment. I'll just keep it for a while, but it might end up at an old bookshop someday as well. The last 5 unread books which I own are just from different authors. So in no particular order, I'll start with the first one, which is The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and Other Tales of Terror by Robert Louis Stevenson. Next is The Importance of Being Earnest and Other Plays by Oscar Wilde. Then I have No Name by Wilkie Collins. This is another very long book, around 800 pages long, but since it's a sensational novel, I hope when I start reading it, I fly through it quickly. The next book which I have is Vanity Fair by William Makepeace Thackeray, another Penguin Popular classic. I believe it's going to be a bit difficult to read this because the font is so small. It's around 700 pages long. And the last unread Victorian classic which I have is Lorna Doone by R.D. Blackmore. So I wasn't too sure whether it's a Victorian classic, but I believe it is. It was published in the Victorian Times, but this story is written around 1685. I don't particularly love the cover of this one. These are all the unread Victorian classics which I have. Let me know in the comments how many unread Victorian classics do you own. I hope I'm not the only one who is hoarding books and not reading them. So that's it guys. I hope you enjoyed this fun little video. I'm going to see you all in my next video very soon. Bye!